Program Director, in his absence, the Honourable Premier of KwaZulu-Natal, Mr. Senzo Mngunu, Chief Director of Procurement at the Department of Trade and Industry, Dr. Tebogo Makube, Director of the National Cleaner Production Centre, South Africa, Mr. Rapulu, fellow manufacturers, distinguished colleagues and guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is a particular pleasure for me to be here today to deliver this keynote address at such an august indaba. And it's a pleasure because today as a country and as a society, we're faced with a historic challenge. The challenge of how working together we can drive back unemployment and reduce economic inequality and poverty in our country. It is for this reason, ladies and gentlemen, that my message today is going to center around the conviction of manufacturers that manufacturing is South Africa's greatest opportunity for higher job-rich growth. One of the reasons this event is so important to each of us is that it demonstrates that we are not alone in believing in the potential of manufacturing in turning around South Africa's economic fortunes. In no particular order, ladies and gentlemen, I would also like to express my gratitude to the provincial government of KwaZulu-Natal for taking the lead and recognizing the importance of manufacturing to the economy of the province and to the country at large, and by blessing this gathering with their presence and active participation. I'd also like to thank our hosts, the National Cleaner Production Centres of South Africa, and also our manufacturing line department in government, the Department of Trade and Industry. Having only had our inaugural event last year, the Manufacturing Indaba is already set to become the premier annual conference for manufacturers and those with a stake and interest in the various manufacturing activities taking place in our country, and also which recognizes the potential that South Africa holds in the manufacturing sector. We are pleased that this initiative is therefore now also being rolled out in an important manufacturing province such as KwaZulu-Natal to an important audience such as yourselves. I'm not only here to support the manufacturing indaba in KwaZulu-Natal, but I'm also here as a representative of my company, Aspen Pharmacare, and our CEO, Mr. Stephen Sard. As you all know, Aspen hails from this province. We support this event also through our membership of the Manufacturing Circle, a corporate association of manufacturers that serves as the voice of manufacturing in South Africa. I'm also here in part as a board member of Proudly South Africa and a board member of Brand South Africa. So I'm wearing a couple of hats today. My main one is I'm from Aspen, from this province. The Manufacturing Circle's purpose, ladies and gentlemen, is to promote manufacturing and the key opportunity that presents to promote job-rich, value-added growth in the South African economy. The membership of the Circle is growing and is open to all companies with manufacturing interest in South Africa, whether large or small, established or emerging, whether privately owned or publicly owned. The reason for this is simple. We may differ in shape and size according to what we do and who we are owned by. However, we all have our own passionate parochial view on how to grow manufacturing, and our manufacturing experiences and challenges are all the same. That is, ladies and gentlemen, the agenda that the Manufacturing Circle serves: to actively address challenges experienced by manufacturers in South Africa, to promote positive change to the environment that must be supported in order for our sector to be resilient and to realize its growth potential. I therefore want to use this platform here today to call on all manufacturers with an agenda similar to ours to contribute to making an environment in which they operate conducive to growing value-added manufacturing in our country. This call is particularly directed at manufacturers in this province, KwaZulu-Natal, where the Manufacturing Circle now has a provincial chapter and already engages with provincial and local governments on behalf of its members. We do this, ladies and gentlemen, by partnering in research in order to establish and demonstrate the facts that will lead us to motivate for change. A change where we diversify economy and place manufacturing at the forefront of our economy. By meeting regularly with key ministers, such as Minister Davies and others, heads of key state entities, such as the South African Reserve Bank and Eskom, and when we go to Parliament, I wanted to acknowledge the presence of Cesar Mchikalana here actually. He's been a supporter of manufacturing for many years as a member of Parliament. When we go to Parliament, we meet other government departments, legislators, policy makers. We try and embark upon them a dynamic understanding of what is happening in the private sector, and particularly how the lessons from the last 50 or 60 years, those economies that have successfully lifted themselves out of poverty, ladies and gentlemen, have done so by building a strong parochial manufacturing sector. We are not there yet in this country. Most crucially, also when we do this advocacy work and we promote the cause of manufacturing to other sectors of the economy, such as mining, banking, and in particular, and very relevant today, is retail, whose health, stability, and buy-in are important and dependent on how we do. We certainly have challenges in convincing them. And your presence here today and our collective resolve will go a long way to meeting that challenge of getting other sectors in the economy to appreciate and acknowledge manufacturing the way we do, and to share the same passion of manufacturing that we do in this room. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, manufacturing in our country is important because of many reasons. I want to cite a few. Firstly, the sector employs 1.6 million people in South Africa. Secondly, it accounts for 11% of GDP, albeit a lesser contribution than what it was 2 decades ago. It's still an important contributor. Thirdly, it is among the top 3 multiplier sectors in terms of value addition, job creation, export earnings, and revenue generation for every 1 rand invested in our economy. Fourthly, it provides the base load and scale for key national infrastructure, such as electricity generation, bulk water supply, ports, and many other municipal services. And lastly, it provides the only viable means of beneficiating natural resources in South Africa. The days of exporting a ton of iron ore for $80 and buying back a couple of milligrams of that in a cell phone for $800, surely, colleagues, have to come to an end. However, manufacturing is also important because of reasons you may not be as well aware of as what I indicated earlier. Some of these reasons include the following. Firstly, research shows that the fortunes of the South African economy are inextricably tied to the prospects of the manufacturing economy and vice versa. Over the last 4 decades, Program Director, the growth of manufacturing has mirrored GDP growth in South Africa, and the Purchasing Managers Index serves as a leading indicator of developments with respect to both. The opportunity for manufacturing to take its place as an engine rather than a mirror of our growth, is therefore on our doorstep. It's up to us to seize this. Addressing the challenges that manufacturing faces head on presents a huge opportunity. The second reason that you might not be as well aware of is growing manufacturing in South Africa is a destiny that is waiting to be fulfilled. While manufacturing share of GDP, as I indicated earlier, has declined somewhat and has remained at an average of around 15% over the last 2 decades, these are levels typically exceeded by countries both at a much lower and higher stage of development than South Africa. South Africa's 2013 GDP per capita was around $6,900 per person, according to the World Bank. At those levels, our manufacturing sector should be exacting a share of the economy in excess of, wait for it, 30% of GDP, or more than double the rate at which it is presently. In fact, it's almost 3 times the rate. Do we need anything more compelling, ladies and gentlemen, to galvanize us into action? The third reason why manufacturing is important is because of the opportunities that are developing for us and around us because a number of global events and realities. Manufacturing jobs can and will return to our country as costs rise in China, as global manufacturers seek to diversify their supply chains, as the geopolitical environment, i.e. in Russia and other jurisdictions, changes. As global manufacturers seek to diversify supply chains, as we better access opportunities for cheaper energy in coming years, and as we position ourselves to service gas and oil exploration, and as we access African markets who have close to 1 billion inhabitants, these opportunities will continue to present. Think packaging, fast-moving consumer goods, durable household goods, metal components, plastics, pipes, tubing, automotive exports, and of course in my sector, pharmaceuticals. But in order to promote an environment in which manufacturers can be more resilient and grow better, we need to understand what it is that manufacturing needs in this country. We have recognized this need and have set about a process to better communicate this to all stakeholders and South African society at large. I just want to deviate from the speech, which Kunrad Bezuidenhout certainly had a very strong hand in compiling. I find, colleagues, that we tend to be manufacturing pessimists in this country. We tend to want to not trust our own products. We'd rather import a branded product or maybe a cheaper product from China. So this manufacturing pessimism is a mindset we need to change amongst ourselves and in our country. And for me, the best example was when Aspen acquired South African Druggist in 1999. SAD in those days, underperforming company, share price had halved, going through very difficult times. And there was this minnow, Aspen, which Financial Mail called it the mouse swallowing the elephant. So we acquired South African Druggist. Now we're sitting with this asset, lots of manufacturing in it, and not quite knowing what to do. And the advice that we got in the first 6 weeks post-acquisition was shut down the facility, at very least downsize it, and move your manufacture into toll manufacturing out of India. And the arguments were quite convincing, and we were really looking east. And then we had our first meeting with the trade union. Caesar, you might remember the late Muzi Buthelezi. He was the head of the Sapawo Investments Company. And as we walked into the room, he said, "You guys are asset strippers." And that's how the discussion started. Anyway, cut a long story short, We realized at that and in subsequent meetings, manufacturing was the heart and lungs of Aspen. We decided to keep our manufacturing. We brought our trade union in as partners. And we started to focus on where our strengths were. And we placed huge emphasis on skills and training and modernizing an aging facility. We did this at significant risk. Our primary focus was to educate and upskill our workforce and to build a world-class facility out of Port Elizabeth. And we also have manufacturing in East London, Johannesburg, and Cape Town in this country. We realized that if we were to succeed, we needed to be on the same team. Our trade union became a major stakeholder, and every worker was included in our share scheme. Billions of rands of value were subsequently created for the investment company of Sapawu. We also knew, ladies and gentlemen, that we needed to take bold and decisive decisions. No vacillating or ducking key issues, straight talk, clear strategy, and getting a motivated, skilled workforce on the same side. We went on risk, but we lived the conviction of creating world-class, competitive, efficient manufacturing in South Africa. I'm pleased to tell you today, some 16 odd years later, after that event, Aspen is now the world's 5th largest generic manufacturer globally, largest in the Southern Hemisphere, and we have manufacturing sites in 26 geographies globally. Sorry, let me rephrase that. We have 26 factories globally, 15 of which are situated in South Africa. Some of these factories are in France, Germany, Netherlands, and the likes. And we find when we make these acquisitions, we acquire factories, whether it's in Brazil, Mexico, or Germany, wherever it is. When we go there and meet the working force, meet the people that are making the tablets and capsules, etc., we find that very often our people here in Port Elizabeth or in East London are better skilled, better equipped. And for me, that sends a message. The message is that as South Africans, we can do it. We can excel, we can build world-class manufacturing out of, what some were referring to when we first got going, deep, dark Africa. We're not so deep and dark, I find, when we compare our skills to other geographies and jurisdictions. Manufacturing has also been a source of great inspiration for us as Aspen in this country. Why do I say that? In 2000, 2001, as a country, we were coming to grips with the magnitude and extent of the AIDS pandemic. And we sat back as an Aspen management team and said, well, what do we do? Do we just sit idly and watch all of this unfold, a catastrophe unfold before our eyes? Or do we get actively involved? People say, well, you can't get involved. These drugs are patent protected. They cost, in those days, $25,000 per patient per year. Multinationals protect patents with their lives. You've got no chance. And we persevered. We took footage of a clinic that former President Nelson Mandela, seeing that the Premier had raised this earlier today when he spoke, we took footage of the Mandela Clinic near his ancestral home. We took it to the multinational companies and we showed them the plight of the people that were visiting this clinic. About 85% of them were HIV positive, and for all intents and purposes were sitting on death row. No prospect of survival. That poignant moment turned the tide. The multinational companies decided to give us licenses for the antiretrovirals, and soon, by 2003, we were in production producing ARVs in our Port Elizabeth facility, a world first, at $180 per patient per year, making these drugs accessible. When I tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that manufacturing in this country saved a generation, I say that with utmost conviction because I saw it with my own two eyes. Had we have not taken that bold step, ARV rollout in this country would have been delayed, in my opinion, by around 4 years, and hundreds of thousands of lives would have been lost. Manufacturing can inspire, and manufacturing does a lot of social good, as I've just indicated. Ladies and gentlemen, let me turn my attention now to a document that is available at the media desk at the event here today. It's a document called 3 Goals to Grow Manufacturing, South Africa's Greatest Opportunity for Higher Job-Rich Growth. This document is authored by the Manufacturing Circle and it is our latest effort to communicate what it is that manufacturers need with some indication of the solutions they propose to the challenges that we all face. On page 3 of the document, you will see that we have identified 3 clear goals to put South Africa on a higher job-rich growth path and enable us to compete and succeed as a manufacturing destination in the global economy. Goal number 1 is for South African manufacturers to achieve a competitive manufacturing environment. If South Africa does not compete successfully with top emerging economies for manufacturing investment, the many quality jobs that manufacturing can provide will not be created. The baseload scale for infrastructure provision, which extends to rural areas, will not exist. And a key driver for the tertiary education in engineering, technical skills, and innovation will not be there. If localizing the beneficiation of our natural resources and the development of our human resources was a top priority, South Africa's potential to deliver economic growth, broad-based prosperity, empowerment, and employment to many South Africans through manufacturing would grow. The scale-based incentives beneficiation offers would promote manufacturing competitiveness, innovation would be triggered, and a culture of entrepreneurship would be fostered. We believe, colleagues, that this can be done. Can be done by encouraging coherent, coordinated, and consistent economic policy, regulation, and policy implementation. Tebogo earlier spent a bit of time on designation as part of preferential procurement in our country. So it was a bold, incisive step by Department of Trade and Industry in 2012. Sadly, many ministries and many departments across our government don't follow designation. Some of them say their mandate is not an industrial mandate. I don't see that, lady. I've just returned back from Russia, from a BRICS Business Council meeting. I don't see that in Russia. When Russia decrees that 50% of all pharmaceuticals will be manufactured locally, I see real tangible action. I see it. Why? Because manufacturers that don't comply, they continue to import into their country, get taken off formularies. We need that same conviction in this country. We need that same cohesion, ladies and gentlemen. A few weeks ago, it dawned on our country that there was a shortage of penicillins. But yet in 2006, we allowed 3 penicillin facilities to close down because tenders were awarded to importers. A basic drug like penicillin. We cannot continue to sit by idly as South Africans and watch the erosion of our industrial base. It can also be done by ensuring efficient spending, cost recoupment, and price regulation for public infrastructure and utility services that support manufacturing growth. It can also be done by engaging on the importance and maintenance of a skills pipeline. And lastly, by endorsing environmental measures and legislation that support sustainable access to land, raw materials, and beneficiation. That was goal number 1 in the document. Goal number 2, as I begin to wrap up, is for South African manufacturers to attain a supportive international trade position, which supports the first goal, which is that of competitiveness. The Department of Trade and Industry We work very closely with, and Tebogo need to be commended. In our experience, DTI are really on top of their game, very passionate. They share the same passion in manufacturing as we do. They have been more prepared than ever, and certainly since 1994, to try and level the playing field for domestic manufacturers. Not an easy task given the various incentives and subsidies that Asian governments offer to their manufacturers. However, adjusting to global trade, structural depression in Europe, the predatory posture of the exporters from certain markets, particularly Asia, as I said earlier, and South Africa's small and highly liberalized market, means that challenges are great if our manufacturers are to prosper on the road to an ever-liberalizing global trade environment. We face huge challenges because imports, which includes consumer items, components and equipment from the East, and processed foods from Europe, coming into South Africa at below raw material prices, often due to substandard production, tariff dodging, dumping, abuse of storage consignments, extensive domestic incentives, currency manipulation, or even WTO infringements continue to be prevalent. We believe these challenges can be successfully counteracted by thrusting, firstly, fair trade forward through necessary adjustment to tariff and non-tariff barriers, tying up closer with African regions and key export markets, tracking better transport linkages to regional and key markets, and lastly, by taking up the benefits of a more stable and competitive exchange rate through the policy instruments available to us. The third and final goal, so I mentioned competitiveness, I mentioned the creation of a supportive international trade environment, and third one is to advance the reputation of South African manufactured products, not dissimilar to the point I was making earlier when I said we're often pessimistic about our own manufacturing capabilities. South African manufactured goods must enjoy increasing levels of positive recognition in the domestic and overseas markets. Our economies of scale would otherwise decline, undermining investment in manufacturing. Manufacturing would decline, slowing economic growth and realizing job losses. There would also be less incentives for career choices and would support value adding in our economy. Skills such as maths, sciences, engineering, and the likes thereof. If we promoted preferential procurement, as I said earlier, for locally manufactured and beneficiated products, better in our domestic market, we would be confronting these challenges head on. And we certainly wouldn't have run out of penicillin a few months ago. If we partner in a strong above-the-line, buy local and buy South African campaign, for which the Manufacturing Circle, the Department of Trade and Industry, along with Proudly South Africa, has already developed a blueprint for, then we would be in a good position to take the reputation of South African manufacturers forward. Above all, we need to believe that our products are the best. I know that you can't convince people on emotion, but you need to put a rational argument forward. Well, how about in a study that we did, for every R1 procured in the public sector, 30 cents more goes back into the fiscal coffers than had you have imported the product into the country. That means you could support, in essence, a 30% premium on the procurement of those products. We as ambassadors of manufacturing need to put those arguments forward cogently. If there's a punchline I want to leave you with today, colleagues, our mantra should be, as South Africans, no more exporting jobs. Let's rather export products. Nothing drives me more delirious than when tenders are awarded and the jobs are created in India or elsewhere. So representatives of government, all those of you who are passionate about manufacturing As I end off, I'd like to urge you to take the document that I referred to that's at the media desk outside and engage in conversation, not only amongst ourselves, the manufacturing community, but use it to motivate for positive change, to promote for the resilience and growth of South African manufacturing amongst ourselves and broader South African society. Distinguished colleagues, as we gather new resolve to tackle the aforementioned challenges that I mentioned, it is critical that we direct our full and collective energies to writing a new story for South Africa, the story of how we built a winning manufacturing industry and contributed towards creating a winning nation. Michelangelo once said, "The greater delay for most of us lies not in setting our aim too high and falling short, but in setting our aim too low and achieving our mark." I'd really like to thank each and every one of you for your attendance here today and wish you all a productive conference that will translate in actionable steps to realize manufacturing as the great opportunity it is for higher job-rich growth in our country. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.